Hi there, welcome to Your Next Big Win. Really delighted to be live with Mahmood this evening. We are talking all about creating a vision, a really clear goal for your next big win. So you might have a fuzzy idea about something that you really want to achieve and go after for your business. But it needs a bit more work, it needs forming so that you can get a plan behind it and really go after it and stop procrastinating, stop letting the day job get in the way and really go for it. So that's what we're here to talk about this evening. We hope you'll enjoy the show. If you're watching live or on replay, just do stick some things in the comments. Tell us what you're thinking. What is your next big win? And we'd be really interested to hear about that. We'll be back in a second. So I think we're just going to play a bit of music for a few seconds and we're going to rock it out and then we'll see you very soon.
See you soon. Fantastic! I love that one. It always of an evening in the UK. If you're watching us from overseas, welcome, hello, and all the rest. It could be daylight, it could be evening. We welcome your company, but that's always good to get the blood flow going there as well. So you might recognise that from a previous incarnation. And as Joe said, it's all about fuzziness, but it's all about converting that dream into the next big win here. So we're going to be sharing a multitude of years of experience of having done that for ourselves, having done that for other people. We hope by the end of this broadcast, you're going to feel a bit less fuzzy and a bit more determined to continue on.
Yeah, being fuzzy can feel quite comfortable, can't it? Because if you're fuzzy, it means that you don't have to do anything about it yet. So how do we get from that fuzzy state to getting that real clarity where we think, right, okay, we know what the next steps are now to make this happen. We need to put a plan in place, and this is what we're going for. So fuzziness is where all the greatest thinking starts. Do you have fuzzy moments, Mahmood?
All the time, Joe. I've had fuzzy moments the moment I was born, probably up till now there as well. It's strange actually that what people's perception of that fuzziness is, because you got a rough idea. You can probably taste it, feel it about what you want that future to look like, to be there as well. I find it sometimes quite frustrating in terms of being too fuzzy, because it's like you have too many options to consider. You have too much to consider. You're not quite sure what direction. And I've always found that I think the more fuzzy something is, I think it's a great start point, the less likely is you're going to get there, because you don't know direction, you don't know what it's going to take in terms of risk, and you've got no clarity, and that just adds to a bit of stress and anxiety, which is not really a comfortable feeling.
No, and fuzziness is the very start of the innovation process. So it's a natural part of the process. The problem is that we can too easily get stuck there because it feels comfortable to know that there's something out there, but we haven't. So therefore, we don't have to take action. We don't have to take the risk yet. But how do we move through that fuzziness? And well, it's through exploration and knowing that it's the very, very beginning of the process. It's about a sense, sometimes a hunch, a real feeling that there's opportunity somewhere that we're not tapping into. We know we want to tap into it, but we're not sure what that opportunity is, how good it is, and how we go about it, I think.
And I presume from that then, Joe, you just have to have a look in terms of, I'm going to take you to this later on, about actually willing to take that first step forward to explore and to dive a little bit deeper there as well.
Yeah, there's an expression that's used by the Design Council, which is the fog of uncertainty, and it's a natural part of any innovation process, which your next big win is, isn't it? You're doing something you've not done before, and you've not done it in this way at this time, so therefore it's an innovation. And how do we drive through fog? If you're going up and down the A1, M1 or whatever, and it's really foggy, you just go really slowly, don't you? You deal with what you can see in front of you, but knowing what your end destination is that you're aiming for, and you just keep edging forward. And I think it's that action, that exploration that leads to clarity. Keep going long enough, and hopefully the fog lifts, or you get to your destination.
Yeah, or if you don't, you're going to crash.
Yes, if you don't look where you're going. Yeah,
absolutely.
You don't want that.
So does that in your mind, when I think about that, I mean, I find a lot of business owners who've got this idea, the big picture stuff there as well.
Mhm.
For many, it stays on the drawing board. It doesn't really actually go to anything here. And I sometimes feel it's like it's a combination of things. It's their own risk radar, their own risk appetite, which isn't attuned to actually making that step forward to taking a degree of risk with what's going on. So in other
Yeah.
words, it may not necessarily come to something. I think it's also, it probably sounds a bit unfair to say, it's not, I don't mean laziness, but I think sometimes application and effort sometimes is a lacking in that first initial step forward to actually try and demystify everything.
I agree. I also think it's a lot of habit. It's easier to get on with the stuff that we already know how to do, the stuff that we do day in, day out,
Yeah.
rather than do the taxing thing of sitting and working out, well, what do we need? What is it we really want? What do we need to do next? It's hard work for the brain to imagine a different future sometimes and do that piece. So, the brain is a really wonderful thing. It's also very lazy because it consumes a lot of energy. So therefore it needs to do the least amount of work as is possible. And it's there to protect us and keep us secure and stop anything bad happening to us, to keep us alive. So therefore it wants security. It wants security and it wants to expend the least energy. That gets us into a bit of a rut. So we can always have this sort of idea at the back of our mind that wouldn't it be great if we did this one day? Wouldn't it be great for the business if we? But unless we actually do something about it, it's never going to happen. And I think part of that is down to habit, being used to doing what we do, the day in, day out, the day job, and really letting that get in the way of breaking through and making that step change.
Yeah, 100%. I think that I was reading in a book I've got on my bookshelf, Brain Wheels, talking similar things here, and it's the idea, isn't it? We as human beings we tend to focus on short-term gratification because we can see the result here. Things that seem quite far away, things that seem quite in the distant here, we're less inclined to achieve them. And I think it was trying to think of these psychologists who came up with the study was saying about this idea of rewarding yourself as you go through. So
Yeah.
you do a little bit of a task, you reward yourself for that, and that just helps to actually move yourself forward there as well, and reduce the procrastination that you might have.
Yeah, there's that super famous marshmallow study with children, later repeated with adults, which is if you leave a child, tell a child that they're going to be left in the room, you're going to pop out, they can have one marshmallow now while you're out, or if they wait, when you come back, they can have 2 marshmallows. Most children, most adults will take the 1 marshmallow that's in front of them rather than hang on for a few minutes to get 2. And going back and looking at those children and adults later on, the ones that actually resisted and hung out for the 2 marshmallows did better in life overall on all sorts of different measures of what doing well in life looks like. So we are gratified by an immediate reward rather than something that's going to come to us later. So you're so right. I haven't heard of that book, by the way. What was it? Brain
Wheels. I'll dig out the author and I'll share it with next week's episode.
Yeah.
But it's called Brain Wheels. But it's fascinating. A bit of a digression here. One of the things it was quite interesting to read in the book as well, and is in terms of historically, if we go back to evolution here, we're used to walking like approximately about 12 miles a day. We're used to having energy, and now because of the way society is, you don't get that energy intake, you don't get that exercise, and it has a massive impact about all those wonderful electrons and neurons that go on in the brain there as well. So it's a fascinating insight here that a lot of our behaviors are linked to the functioning of the brain.
Yeah, definitely. And there's some recent research that's been done that shows that when we move the large muscles in our legs, it actually activates neural connectivity and is good for brain health, creativity, and so much more. So all the great thinkers that I can recall were great walkers as well. Not necessarily 12 miles a day, but they always made time in the day to go for a walk. So I suppose that's one of our first tips, isn't it? Apart from driving through the fog really steadily, is if you want to think something through, just go for a walk.
Yeah.
Get out in the fresh air, get a change of scene, move a bit, and let your brain work away for you in the background.
Yeah, it's interesting, Joe, isn't it? Because I think a lot of business owners, and I'll my hands up to this occasionally having succumbed to that, we tend to neglect the most important asset in our business, ourselves, and we tend not to think about looking after ourselves, how we think, the exercise, the nature, the connectivity to the outside world, doing things away from our desk, breaking that routine can have really powerful effects, not just for well-being, but also how we act and how we move things forward in our business.
Definitely. And I think sometimes when I work with entrepreneurs, and I don't know if it's the same with your experience as well, Mahmood, but they keep a lot of stuff in their head. And the head is a really rubbish place to store stuff. That's not what it's designed for. And whenever we're trying to remember stuff and keep stuff, up here, it means we haven't got the capacity to think more creatively. We haven't got the working capital, if you like, the working capacity in the brain to think more creatively. So it's really good to get empty all the day-to-day thoughts out onto a page or a screen or whatever, but also to do that with your next big win that's sort of incubating and developing is to keep getting your thoughts out there, maybe on a whiteboard in the office that you've got up on the wall, or on a mind map that you've got on the top of your computer or your phone or something. But just get it out there so you can see it in words and colours and images and keep adding to it. And that really helps articulate the vision quite clearly, I think, and the goal.
You're effectively talking also like creating that story, isn't it, for your business there as well. And I think it's about, as you quite rightly said, don't store it up there. I don't know if it's your experience as well, come across business owners who are quite reluctant to commit something to paper, to a document, because they're quite scared. They think somebody's going to nick their idea. And I've always been on the belief, it sounds quite dismissive, that not quite ideas are 10 a penny, but ideas are important. But an idea in itself does not do anything for you. Doesn't make you any money, doesn't advance anything else. But it's what you do with the idea that's more important than actually, So I would say I'd be less concerned about putting it on paper. You can protect yourself to some extent, but don't lock it up because you think somebody's going to steal it from you.
Yeah, and also connected with that, some people are resistant to putting things down on a page or something because they think, well, I'm going to be committed to that then, and what happens if I fail? So there's a link between being worried about that and being committal and therefore not moving forward. And what we see a lot is that the idea people have for the opportunity for the next big win, sometimes it's really clear and tangible and stays the same. So for instance, if you want to win a big bid or tender or funding option, you're bidding for something, you're tendering for something, or you're submitting a grant application, there's a clear thing there. But for other opportunities that are a bit more nebulous, the opportunity changes the more we learn about it. So the vision and the goal that we start off with, the fuzziness, is often very different as we move through, just because we're learning more about it. So what we want to do is a bit of a shape-shifting thing as well.
Yeah,
it should evolve, and that's okay.
It's quite weird. It's strange you say that, Joe. I think we've got 3 or 4 tips first of all. So let's see where we are. We talked about the looking after yourself, the connectivity. We were talking about get your ideas out from here, the worst off-filing office in the world. Get it onto a piece of paper or something. We're talking about that sharing. And I think also that things evolve. If I think about some of the most recognized platforms we have, like YouTube, like Google and the rest, they didn't actually start off in those carnations. So I think YouTube, when it started, wasn't actually as it is now. I think it started off as was it just a video uploading experience or?
Yeah, and just so many things, because what happens is that the businesses who have an original idea and then start to shape it, learn new things about what the users actually want and how people use the products and services in a different way. That creates new opportunities, and the thing to do is really follow where the opportunity is and go with that, so that the next big win is a successful outcome, because it's actually delivering what customers want and will use and will pay for, rather than what you think customers might want, use and pay for. It closes the gap, and how we close the gap is really through action and exploration and doing things. We're not going to close the gap just by reflecting round and round in a circular fashion.
Yeah,
with no input. Yeah.
And I think there's 2 things there that you can, and I know me and you are big fans of this. That comes out of that idea, that MVP idea, and customer feedback. So get something that's got a minimum value proposition, get it out there, but make sure you build it based on what the customer wants, not what you think they need.
Yeah, and it's going to be useful enough for you to test it, but you've got to, this is part of getting out of the fuzziness. One of the questions you can ask yourself, if you know, when you're watching this and you're thinking, okay, well, there's a product or a service we'd like to launch in our business, but what do we do next? It's start to articulate, well, what might the minimum viable proposition be for that product or service, or for that new growth or new premises or whatever it is. And how you do that is you think about, well, what must it have? What must definitely be part of it? You can't do without. Got to be part of it. And what would be nice to have? And it's really helpful to separate what we must have from what we would be nice to have, because we can do the nice to have later, and then also what it needs to avoid. And that's all it is. That's all that minimum viable proposition is.
It's a weird actually. If you're listening to this, folks, thinking that sounds really complex, well, think about what you do when you put a job advert out for a member of staff here. You typically would have essential features, the red lines. You must have this. Then you've got, it would be nice to have there as well. You're just applying that same rationale to when you're developing your sort of next big win. And what I like about this, the way this is evolving, Joe, it's exactly the same approach that I would adopt when putting together a financial plan, what that looks like in numbers. I never like to do the numbers first. I always like to do the numbers last, because until you've got that clarity of story, until you've got the shape it's taking, that's the point you actually start thinking, what's the financial impact on that? Because I think far too many people put obstacles in their way. They say, oh, I can't afford to do X, I can't afford to do this is going to be too expensive. And I'm thinking, you can't make that conclusion until you know what it is you're going to be offering. Then you can translate that financially, and then you can say, actually, that's not going to work. So what can you do to actually make it viable? Numbers last as opposed to first.
What you can do early on in the when I say you, I mean everybody, right? What we can do early on in the innovation process, once we've got this fuzzy idea that there's something that we want to achieve, is start to write down all the assumptions that we are making. So what we believe to be true. So it could be it's going to be too expensive. It's going to be hard to do. Not sure if anybody will want it. Or it could be this is going to fly off the shelves and everybody's going to be wanting this. Whatever it is you are believing and assuming to be the case about the next big win that's incubating for you, write them all down, make a list of them, and then go back, have a cup of tea, then go back to that list and write alternative statements. It's called a counter assumption, and then look at the two. And say, okay, which one is more likely to be? What evidence do I have that one is truer than the other? And what that does is it drives out gaps that we don't know about. So, well, I've got evidence for this, and for this, but this is something I can't prove this either way. I can't evidence this either way, right? So then we can go and find out, and we can start asking some questions and doing some digging and all of that, and that's how it starts to shape. But just a bit at a time. It doesn't have to be all at once. You can do it a bit at a time.
I think definitely. Probably the emphasis is literally a little bit at a time. Don't overwhelm yourself. And I think that's probably one of the things that actually prevents you not achieving something, is if you break things down into smaller steps. Don't look at where you want to get to. Look at what the next mini milestone will be, and that's your targeted progression. What I would say, folks, if you're listening in, by the way, you think this is great, fascinating stuff, so obviously chuck a comment in the comments box so we know you're there. But if you want to keep in touch and get more regular information from me and Joe, then drop us a line. Go onto the nextbigwin.co.uk. There is a sign up form there. There's a wonderful leadership quiz there. I'll just do a little plug for there as well, and you can actually be part of our community here and actually receive a lot of this information and updates as we go through.
Definitely. The quiz is great. If it takes you a few seconds, and you'll get a personalised report flipped back to you, letting you know what your leadership style is, your approach is to getting your next big win, along with a couple of really easy tips that you can implement straight away.
So Joe, you go.
No, I was going to say, we were talking about just before we were saying around writing things down and becoming less fuzzy about things. I think some of it is about being a bit brave as well, and really working out how you get from the comfort zone into the growth zone, passing through the fear zone, right? Because at the edge of the comfort zone is this sort of fuzzy boundary where we starting to feel a bit more uncomfortable as we go through it. And as part of these assumptions that you're listing down, think, well, what is it I'm actually worried about? What is holding me back? Why is it that I've not done anything about this yet? And then you can work through that and shape the goal and the vision accordingly, taking that into account, because I think when we're creating a goal for our next big win, it's really important that we understand how we feel about it, so that then we can deal with that and then create the goal for the next big win that's really relevant to us and really compelling and what really matters, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think we can get in the way of ourselves sometimes. I think we can be our obstacle. And I like that transition about that fear zone. I'd probably put it slightly differently here, but it's the same idea there, is that lots of people, for good reason or otherwise, will have great ambition as an exercise, have great aspirations here, but will find it very difficult to make that first step to actually going out there to try and achieve it there. Now, whether it's risk averse, whether they're worried and scared that it's going to fail, whether they're worried it's going to be financially catastrophic, and whether they're actually worried that it might be successful. I have come across business owners that, I wouldn't say deliberately go out to sabotage themselves, but they don't actually want to try, just in case they realise they're either not up for it or it might succeed, and what are they going to do next there as well. There's a lot of weird stuff that goes on here, but you've got to be brave. And it's not bravery. If you measure it, if you do it correctly, you're minimizing any sort of catastrophe that's going to happen.
I've done some work with the RAF on innovation a while ago, and one of the things that we did, and they've run some sessions as well, and so we've done some sort of co-facilitation of things. And one of the activities they've asked people to do in sessions is to break down how many steps it takes to iron a shirt. And people come up with 10, 12, something like that. And that's right, but what they're talking about is milestones rather than steps. When you it's something like, I'm sure if you're watching, please do correct me, colleagues in the RAF. It's something like 113, because you've got to do this, get this, move this, move the sleeve round, do this with the oven, not the oven, the iron. God, it's nearly tea time, nearly dinner time. Do this with the iron, and when you break it down, and you could break it down into even more micro steps. And I think sometimes just people feel overwhelmed. I'd love to be doing this and have a business that has got this vision. I think we were talking, and we put in the post about Bill Gates wanting a computer on every desk in every home, and at the time that was a huge vision. Well, how do you get there? Well, it's about doing a small thing and then another small thing and another. So it's a whole series of micro steps, and then look at where we are today.
Yeah, and there's also that's a put my maths hat on. There's a bit of compounding as well. You do one little step, that one little step makes to the next step here, and before you know it, just like saving money, you save a quid a week. You then sort of increase that slightly. Before you know it, you've got a whole jar full of pound coins there. So look more so. I mean, have an idea what that end point looks like, but have an idea what that looks like, breaking it down into, this is my first milestone, this is my second milestone, or shall we say centimetre stone, if it makes it more acceptable.
And like driving through the fog, and there's another great quote about, to get up the staircase at the side of the mountain, you don't need to see the top of the mountain, you just need to see the stairs in front of you. So when you are at this really early stage, thinking about your next big win and what you sense it might be, you don't need to know the whole picture. You just need to know the direction of travel, right? The staircase up a mountain, it's upwards that way. And you just need to go, okay, so therefore, this is what I do next and next and next to keep moving. So don't be overwhelmed if you're thinking you don't know what the end result is going to be or look like. That's okay. You will work it out. but you do need to have a good idea of what you might like before you set off. Otherwise, you're going to be facing and walking in the wrong direction.
I think it'd be a good question. If you're listening, folks, here, so if you have a next big win in your sort of up there, if you're thinking this is my next big win, this is what I'd like to do, what's the thing that you would identify as holding you back? What stops you from actually taking that first step? What stops you from having a go? Is it money? Is it mindset? Is it you don't think you can do it? Is it lack of support, capacity? I'd be interested to know what that answer might be for you.
And yeah, please do let us know in the comments. For me, my thing that I am often challenged by is that I think I'm going to put all that work in, and what happens if I'm not successful? What happens if I do all of that work, I'm not successful at the end of it? And what I'm learning and have learned over years is that, and really only starting to get it now, is that whatever I go for, the journey has got to matter and be as enjoyable as arriving at the destination. So I've got to know and feel that I'll enjoy the vast majority, not all of it, but the vast majority of putting in the work to get an outcome. And if I get the outcome, that's a bonus, because we can only ever control the things, the inputs that we create. We can, and the things we do. We can't necessarily control what the result of that is going to be in the outside world. So just enjoying the journey is really, really an important part of that. And then the success at the end is great. It might not come, but at least you'll have learned and enjoyed and done some really good. Also, do you find this, Mahmood, that you set off with a big goal and you're working towards something, and then other things that are different but even better and more interesting happen as a result of the work that you're putting in, but you could never have dreamed of those? That wasn't what you were intending. You were intending something else, but these opportunities come from all sorts of places because you've started this work.
Agreed. I mean, if I think we're talking analogies here, if you go on a journey, if you go for a walk through the woods, you want to get to an end point here. You may suddenly, as you go on that journey, you might suddenly spot something on the ground. You think, oh, this looks fascinating. I like this. You would never have seen that unless you've gone on a journey. And it's the same with that business. If I think about all the things that I've tried over 28 plus years in business, some of which have been successful, some have been like a real disaster. Every single one of those, I've managed to take something from that. Sometimes things end up like a partially completed project. I'll park it. I'll come back to it several years later and suddenly go, I tried that before and I've got that to learn, to reuse, to repurpose, to recycle. But yeah, I love it all in terms of doing it. And for me, it's not, I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, everyone likes to make money. You need to, but it's not, that is not the purpose. It's about what you can learn, what you can develop. But if you don't try it, you will never experience it.
Yeah. And trying and working on things that that you enjoy, value, that are on purpose, that they're taking you towards the bigger purpose that you've got for you and your business, and every next big win that you go for your business really needs to be a stepping stone towards that bigger mission and vision and why you started the business in the first place. So yeah, it will all take you there. It's just sometimes the outcomes can be very different from the one you intended, and that's all right. That's part of business, as long as you're keeping your eye on things. And we'll talk about this in the shows to come, but using your KPIs to, the leading indicators to track how you're going, you can change course and all of that. But you've got to start the journey. You've got to set off and do some stuff.
So, okay, Joe, that's your one tip, I'm guessing. What's your one do not? So let's end the show with a do and a do not. Your do is just to do it. What's your do not?
Do not have regrets. Do not faff about, procrastinate, and dilly-dally for so long that somebody else beats you to it, or you miss your moment, and you're a could have, would have, nice to have had, I had that idea, whatever. That's a real shame. If it's meaningful to you, please get on with it. Don't dilly-dally.
Yeah, I like that. And that thinks of a song. For me, it would be do actually think about having a next big win. If you stand still, that is a real dangerous position to adopt in your business, because it will not be the same. If anything, the last 3 years has taught us here, things are never going to be the same. So do something, And I'm probably going to echo yours as well, Joe. One of the worst phrases I come across and sentiments in business that I come across and in life is, I wish I had done X. And I'm thinking that's such a, I can understand the sentiment, but it's such a ridiculous statement to make.
Yeah. And also, well, it's not the right time. Now, there are some times that are definitely not the right time, right? But most of the time, it's not the right time. Most of the time, it's as good a time as any. And I think making sure that if we're saying it's not the right time, it really isn't the right time, and we're not just saying it's not the right time.
Making excuses. And folks, listen, with that, we've enjoyed your company tonight. If you've got any comments to make, just add comments, replay, something like that. We know you're out there. Please do check out nextbigwin.co.uk. There's a fascinating leadership question there. We will be talking about leadership styles later on in future series. But until next week, have a fantastic week and think about your next big win.
See you next time. Thank you.
See you next time. Cheers, folks.